Swoop! Swoop! Hello, everybody, and today I'm going to do a full-on deep dive discussion into The Witcher show and all my thoughts, because my review I put out after binging the show and I was really tired, and I just don't feel like I did quite a good enough job justifying my opinions, talking about it in depth, and I would like to do that here. I watched the show again all the way through, have some very detailed notes, and just want to kind of better communicate what worked, what didn't, and just give the best objective view I possibly can. Of course, it's my opinion, and I'd love to know yours. There's no reason to get all caps rage on me for an opinion. I get some people will, because this is the way the internet works, but whatever. So for me, this is going to be my full-on, long-form, deep dive, spoiler-filled thoughts on The Witcher TV show, and I'd love to know yours as well, but this is your final and official spoiler warning for this video, the comment section. Though if you're a part of this channel, you're subscribed here, you're probably a big fantasy fan, so you've probably already seen The Witcher show, legally or not on Netflix. I don't know what you do. But we're going to get into a lot of the different aspects of the show here, whether it's the acting, the VFX, the dialogue, the story, the pacing, the editing, all of that will be discussed. So buckle up and let's go ahead and dive into The Witcher. So let's go ahead and start with the least divisive thing here, because it's amazing to me what percentage of people online seem to think it's like the greatest show or it's atrociously bad. There's a very polarizing. Obviously, there's some people in the middle with me here because that's where I kind of fall, but a lot as well are claiming it's like a 10 or a 1, and they tend to just kind of really pull in those directions. But one thing almost everyone seems to agree on is that the performances overall were very enjoyable. Now, let's start with the main star of the show, the titular title character, Geralt. Henry Cavill cheesed up his performance. In my opinion, the exact right amount. There's very different ways you could approach being this hunter of monsters, but it's difficult to come across as this badass monster slayer with the big sword and not kind of be comical. You need to really find a fine line. I think he did the appropriate amount. The memeing of his like fuck is kind of like the biggest joke of like the show, but I don't think that's in a bad way. I think people are just really digging his delivery of that line. Now, he could have just kind of completely not embodied that and gone for a much more just like standard stoic rogue type without going kind of the over the top, I'm the Geralt Rivia Witcher. But I feel like that would have been a bigger betrayal of the source material character, because Witchers are viewed as this emotionless thing. He needed to come across a bit more jaded, over the top badass than your typical Aragorn types. So I think he found that line quite well. I think the fact that Henry Cavill is a massive fan of the show came through very clearly, because he really nailed a lot of the smaller moments here. While I think maybe his acting performance wasn't the best of the show, in terms of understanding the character with the choices made, I give it to him, hats off. I don't think it's perfect, but I think it's as good as anyone could expect. Though I could totally understand some people having some problems if they wanted a completely serious take on what this character is. But there is this more kind of over-the-top aspects of the character which can come across poorly, but they landed for me, so I like them. It's just with this type of character, it's easy to go over badass. It's easy to go, oh, take it way too seriously. I don't think he ever entered that territory. So now let's move on to Yennefer. Now, for me, this is the star of the show in terms of performance. I understand there's some people who still do not like her casting due to descriptions in books versus how she appears. Sorry, I've just never been a person who cares about that, so I'm not even going to get involved in that fight because I just don't care. But I do know this actress did a hell of a job bringing this story's emotion to life. I really sympathized with the emotional arc and the transformation the character goes through. Granted, I already knew what it was because I've read the books, but for me, she absolutely is why Yennefer works here. There were some complaints I saw online about the prosthetics when she was still in the hunchback state, not being believable enough, and you could just tell it was a pretty beautiful woman with, you know, some prosthetics on. I get the point there. She's definitely gorgeous, and it's hard to find that, and they could have taken it a bit further, but man, she threw it all into this role, I feel like, and I appreciate it. In terms of emotional connection to the show, this character I don't see, with the performance given and the story told, how this isn't the heart of the show in a lot of ways in terms of where you connect and land, because it's a tragic one. I don't agree with the people who are saying the message is harmful, because it's about the sacrifices she made for a very vain goal, very vain gaining that is now causing her a lot of misery. It's about the reality of beauty and power and how it doesn't bring happiness. So I really enjoyed what's going on there. But that's an interesting discussion. If people still disagree and think that the Yennefer story was offensive, let me know in the comments down below, and people please be respectful. This is just a discussion, and it's a TV show. No one should get that mad about a TV show. And this brings us to the final big star of the show, Ciri. And I think the performance here was fine. I liked it. But for me, the story around the performance was where I had some trouble. So I'll hold off getting onto this one a bit more, but I stand by what I said in my original review. The Ciri performance is fine. She did a good job. The actress is now 18 years old, but she definitely came across a bit younger in the show. And yeah, this is fine, but let's move on so we can get into the problems with that storyline a bit more as we go forward. Now, before we get into like the real subjective stuff, I want to hit on one more fairly just objective thing here, and that is the VFX. I get how if people don't really have an eye for this stuff or they don't really care, this won't bother them at all. But the VFX did bother me several times. The two most notable examples are with the dragon. When that is on screen, it does not look good. I recommend you just go back and watch it and maybe slow it down, but that is not a very well-realized dragon in those scenes. In fact, I feel like that is the weakest episode of the show due to the whole people coming back to life, the faking out death. There's so many tropes hit there that I so do not like. That one for me stuck out like a sore thumb. And there were also the eels. When the sorceresses are turned into the eels and they go in the water, that did not look great when the eels slithered out. They looked way too glossy. They didn't blend in with the lighting correctly, in my opinion. That was not a well-realized effect. And the reason some effects will not look as good is just flat out they don't have the time to polish every shot, and because it's maybe being rushed, and so then you have certain just VFX that aren't up to the quality of the rest. And that seems to be what happened here, because I have a suspicion that Netflix did rush this show. I think especially in post-production, it was rushed a bit, maybe even a bit in pre, but we'll get into that more as we move on. But the first real strong bit of evidence we have for that is these VFX inconsistencies. A show that isn't rushed, like Game of Thrones, you'll notice, especially in the later seasons, which, the later seasons have their controversies, they're not great. In general, their VFX are flawless from beginning to end, and that's because HBO set a standard for themselves where they give it this wider berth of post-production with more money actually aimed towards the post-production to make it look polished and done. That was not done for The Witcher, and there's a lot of evidence for that. And I have a opinion here that maybe Netflix's biggest priority is getting something good thrown together and getting out as soon as possible for return on investment, which gives me a lot of nervousness. I hope they'll learn their lesson, because I've seen these criticisms towards VFX in The Witcher kind of repeated again and again online. I'm hoping they learn their lesson and give things a couple more months to just have that processing time to actually look as good as it should. I don't think it was a budgeting issue, because Witcher's budget was not bad. Now actually, let's transition into the battle and fight scenes, and actually that'll lend more evidence to what I'm talking about here. So there's a couple good to great fight scenes here in the first season of The Witcher. Episode 1 especially has this beautiful fight scene that just looked so good. You can tell they wanted that in their first episode to really hook people, and it was effective. Not only did it kind of make me go, but even when my brother, who's not that big a fan of the show, I think he actually quit watching it, saw that fight scene, he was intrigued and went, that got me. Unfortunately, the show lost him later on, but that's not coming to account my review here. But yes, that fight scene is impressing people from mega fans to not. No other fight scenes up to that. We have a couple other good ones, but there's even a couple really bad ones. Going back to that dragon episode, the amount of cutting in the fight scene in the cave is absurd. I would have loved for those to have had some longer shots, some better realized moments, and if the pre-production and post-production had been longer, you certainly could have, because the fight choreography for The Witcher is great at times, and I feel like could have even been great there, but maybe they were rushed a bit again. Maybe they didn't have the time to set up that kind of wonderful, we can do longer takes fights, and that's what it felt like. And the fact that we're seeing the fight choreographer leave for The Witcher, possibly out of frustration, that's purely conjecture, I don't know, but yeah, they're gone. But yeah, it's bothering me, and I want to see more better quality fights, because with some monster scenes, they were really wonderful. I love the practical monsters in the show, the CG ones. But yeah, the fights need to step it up. And in a world where we've seen spectacular fight scenes done in TV shows and movies, and this using cutting to get around maybe sloppier or not as well choreographed fight scenes is less and less accepted as we go forward. And I think more and more people will have a larger problem with it. And then there's the issue with the battles, where I think the battles were fine for the most part, especially the slaughter of the city. But in terms of the battle on the field, that one I had problems with because of just people stopping and talking. I mentioned this in my review, but that is one of my biggest pet peeves. It's not even like they had their men clear out a way. They were just in the middle of it, heavy action, people dying, and then they just had time to stop and talk and mourn and look at people and do things, and like that's just not how this works. You need to at least show their bodyguards making an effort or something, not just having them stop in the middle of a battle. That completely removes me from the moment, and that's where I'm coming from there. I get that might not remove everybody, that's okay. Your suspension of disbelief is better than mine, but for me that was, oh, I hate that. I hate that! Now let's get into the story. And this will be by far the most controversial thing for me to get into, because this is what people are debating about online nonstop. This show's story is not structured like most shows' stories. Most shows have a beginning and you go with the characters through time till the end in a linear fashion. This is not that. This is very non-linear. In fact, it's non-linear with a bunch of weird side stories and offshoots. It's this really like taken apart tree that's reorganized. And for someone who's read the books, it was not confusing. I was able to follow it, no problem. In fact, I've never seen someone who's read the books say they had a problem following along. I mentioned in my review that it could be confusing for a lot of people, and I maintain that. I think it definitely was. And there were some people who were commenting like, only an idiot would be confused, it was so easy. Congratulations, you're smarter than everybody, woo. But yes, there's some people it was confusing for, and if I believe they had gone through the script once more to clear things up and maybe work on the pacing as well, that wouldn't have been nearly as big a problem. The story itself, I think, is magnificent. It's the story of The Witcher. They made some changes. Those changes, I see why they made them, and I'm okay with them, but the biggest problem for me was the pacing and not clear communication of what's going on, because I believe I'm right in saying that it would confuse some people from the amount of people I've seen commenting in my videos saying, yes, I was confused. There's just people who aren't digesting every single line of dialogue of a show, and that's fine. I like to, but there's people who like to sit on their phone and kind of zone in and out, and hey, if that's how you want to watch a show, that's how you want to watch a show. Do I think that shows should be catered towards that audience? Absolutely not. But I think Witcher kind of is going too far the other direction, where if you even just miss a couple lines here and there and you don't fully process what they mean, you could be a bit confused. There's a spectrum, and I think Witcher is more over here on the, yeah, you really, really need to pay attention, especially for people who aren't used to fantasy stories. If you're used to fantasy stories, of course, you'll have a leg up here as well. But now let's transition into focusing on the pacing. This is the weakest aspect of the entire show for me. I think it's very stop-go, with the constant shooting into, let's just call them what they are, side quests, well, I think is unavoidable with coming in The Witcher, could have been handled better. It's just that having these side quests also with this mixed up timeline, if the timeline had been communicated better and we had gotten more signaling for when exactly everything is happening, then I think it would have worked and felt more like a progressive journey for our protagonists. But it just, to me, was like, okay, he's doing this now while this is all happening. Now he's over here while this is all happening. It just was very stop-go, stutter-start. And that, I think, just needed a script cleanup. The show is not horrendous. I know it sounds like I'm being negative here. I still stand by my rating of a 6.5, which is above average. I would say that's good. But there's just these problems, which, again, I feel like if maybe pre-production had had a bit of a twist turn on it by Netflix's timeline, this could explain a lot of these problems. And this is where I specifically want to bring up Ciri's storyline again. I don't think we got maybe more than a couple breaths with Ciri's storyline. It was just go, 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 when I really wanted smaller character moments with her, but none of them lasted more than a couple of minutes, and that problem's kind of with everyone's line. There's not a whole lot of breathing here at all because they covered so much ground in this first season. For her especially, I wanted just a deeper Okay, let's talk about what's going on. Let's figure out these politics and countries moving, because her story could have been much better used to clearly convey what all these wars are, when's happening where, and we just didn't get that. I would have loved Ciri's story, without taking it or reducing it all, also to have just been used to convey all of this politics a little clearer as well, because while people are confused by the timeline, some people, a lot more I've noticed, are even more confused by what exactly is happening with these kingdoms, why are they fighting, who's coming from where, what are these kingdoms they're mentioning, and Ciri's storyline could have been utilized, in my opinion, to flesh that out as well. I'm coming at it from someone who's read the books and gets this stuff. I'm just trying to sympathize and give an olive branch to these people who, you have to understand, come in knowing nothing and have every right to come into this show and expect to have things explained to them where they, as a non-previous fan, can enjoy it, because that's where every show should start. In fact, I would go as far as to say the people who have read the books and played the games, I've noticed, are really liking the presentation of the world, where people who haven't seem to have a consistent issue of what exactly is this? What's going on? Can we get an explanation here? They really want to learn more, and The Witcher show is not presenting them with opportunities to learn more. It's almost like it's saying, yeah, go pick up the books, go play the game, and then you'll better flesh out and why exactly these magic users are dividing right now. I really wanted a lot more time with this show, slowing down and better realizing the conflicts that are happening among Yennefer's peers and what the implications are from a lot of these smaller moments we had. It just felt like this show needed to be at least a few more episodes, if not this storyline needed to be 2 whole seasons. So this brings me to the final factor I really want to talk about here, and I'm calling it the spice. And that's essentially, how does all this I just talked about mix together? What's the end result? Well, blatantly, it's my 6.5 score. That being said, it's a very appealing 6.5. Most people I know who get through the first few episodes ride it to the end and enjoyed it overall. Even the people who I've met who have said, I didn't like it so much, really did still enjoy it. They have problems. A lot of the ones I still bring up here, a lot of the points I'm actually talking about are stuff that I've kind of taken from friends I've discussed the show with, but at least they have fun. This is a fun show, and the performances especially, I think, are why this is working so consistently for so many people. Henry Cavill is so clearly having fun with this. He's so clearly passionate about it that it's intoxicating. When he's on screen, it feels like someone is just living out the role of their dreams, and I think that comes across in a way where your audience is just, yes, 100%, and that's beautiful. I am all about that. And for me, I enjoyed every basically moment where you could tell Henry Cavill was kind of getting to do a moment from the books he really loved. There were a lot of those, and each time I think his kind of just performance elevated itself. On top of that, we got a spectacular performance from Yennefer, who was able to really help the entire show come together in an emotional way. I'm really hoping season 2 we get to really see the ramifications of that big, well, in my opinion, messy battle at the very end, because she is now set up to carry on the rest of the Yennefer story wonderfully, and I can't wait to see how well that is explored. So while I have very, very mixed feelings about season 1 of The Witcher, I'm actually incredibly excited for season 2, because while I think this one was rushed, it was a commercial smash success for Netflix. So I'm hoping for season 2 they give them much more time for pre and post production. I hope they realize this is going to be their big deal, big daddy, and as Stranger Things ends, this might be the next thing to carry them. Give them a bigger budget, give them more time, be a bit more hands off, and let this show reach its full potential, which I think unequivocally it is not at right now. But that is my final thoughts on The Witcher show. Let me know yours in the comments down below. I will be fascinated to see and read them. Like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. And have a good one, y'all. Peace.